Walter said he rang that buzzer, but you can't hear it out in the foyer, I guess. We're in verse 3 of chapter 30, Genesis. If you'd like to open your Bibles to that passage, Genesis 30 and verse 3. Before we begin, let's bow our heads a word of opening prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we approach your throne this morning thanking you for all the blessings we've received. We know every good gift and every perfect gift comes from you. We're thankful especially for the gift of your Son who died on the cross on behalf of our sins, that we might have forgiveness and the hope of eternal life. We're so thankful for each and every one who's present today, who's come out to study from your word. We ask that you'll bless us in this hour of Bible study, that we can gather from it the things that we stand in need of, things that we can apply to our hearts and our lives and live a better life of service to you. We ask that you'll bless the congregation here in every effort that we put forth to expand the borders of your kingdom, and that souls may be saved because of our efforts. We're so thankful for each and every member here, and for those who are sick and unable to be out with us today. We ask that you bless them and strengthen them and place your healing hand upon them, that they might be restored to a portion of health, if it be your will, and that they might come back out to worship with us once more. We ask that you forgive us of our sins, help us to live a faithful Christian life, so on that last day we may hear you say, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord." It's in Jesus' name that we pray, and amen. Well, the last chapter and this chapter are dealing with the 12 tribes, the origin, if you will, of the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 sons of Jacob. You remember, Jacob's name is not a name that is very desirable. He's called Jacob, or heel grabber. Jacob today is used a lot. We have young babies being named Jacob all the time, because Jacob is a hero in the Old Testament. But originally, the name Jacob was not a very flattering name. It just simply meant someone who grabs the heel and turns somebody upside down, which is what he did to Esau, his brother, from the time that Esau was born. He came out of the womb holding onto his heel. And of course, God told Rebekah that the younger one would be favored, the older one would serve the younger. And that's not saying that God approved of all the deception and all the things that Jacob did. And I believe he didn't approve of those things. And he taught Jacob a very valuable lesson 20 years under Laban. But still, he knew that this was going to happen. He knew that this would be how this turned out. Had Jacob not been deceptive to Isaac and took the blessing, had taken the blessing that was really supposed to be meant for Esau, had he not gotten the birthright the way he did with the stew, the lentil stew, God would have found another way to bring it about. There's no doubt in my mind, because he said that's the way it was going to work out. But at any rate, this is how it did turn out. And God used that situation and just simply said, this is how it would be. But Jacob's name is going to be changed to Israel, which is a name that really means a lot more. And Jacob is going to appreciate that. The fact that he is Jacob, or the heel grabber, later he is to be known as Israel, the Prince of God. And that's also going to become the name of the children of Israel. They're going to be the nation known as Israel. And they're going to all come from these 12 tribes. The 12 tribes are the 12 sons that Jacob bears, or Jacob begets, and his wives bear. You have Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah, the handmaids. And of those 4 women come all of these sons. There's one daughter that's born that we know about. And her name, she's going to be named in here as well. But for the most part, he's talking about the sons. And so we see that Leah has already borne several sons, hasn't she? She's borne 4 sons. Okay, and that brings us into chapter 30, And Rachel saw that she bears Jacob no children. She gives her handmaid to Jacob. She blames Jacob, first of all, and said, give me children or else I die. Well, you've got, Jacob has the two wives here, doesn't he? Whether that's right or wrong is beside the point right now. Of course, we understand that that's not the way God intended it. But since he has these two wives, and Leah's having no trouble as far as getting pregnant and bearing children, the problem's not with Jacob, is it? The problem's with Rachel. Biologically, in whatever way. Someone said, well, the Lord held her womb back. Yes, he did. Whatever means he used, I don't know. Whether it was natural or whether it was just God miraculously some way closing her womb so that she would not bear children. Not yet, anyway. We do know that the Lord saw that Rachel was loved and Leah was, we'll say, loved less. The word King James word there, hated, is what's used. And oftentimes we misunderstand that to mean that Jacob just could not stand Leah. Well, that's not really the case because, he's had 4 sons by her. All right, so her to the extent that he doesn't want to be around her. He's able to be with her, and of course she does bear him 4 children so far. But Rachel is getting very jealous, very upset, and so she says, give me children or else I die. And Jacob gets a little angry with Rachel here too, doesn't he? Am I in God's place that I can do this? This is not within my power. I don't have any control over this. And so she said, behold, my maid Beheld, go in unto her that she may bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her. This is an ancient custom. Again, whether it's right or wrong is not discussed here. It's just simply a statement of fact. Bearing upon my knees. Job mentions this too. Job 3 and verse 12. In some Eastern societies, by placing the infant upon a person's knees, it becomes their child. In the case of Job, some is talking about laying on a man's knees and the man becoming the father of the child. But the same thing would be true if the baby born by Bilhah would be placed upon Rachel's knees. That means that she's the slave woman, and this baby now becomes Rachel's baby. All right. So this is how this is to work. And she gave him Bilhah, her handmaid, to wife, and Jacob went in unto her, and Bilhah conceived, and bare Jacob a son. So here this servant woman, slave woman of Rachel's, bears a child for Rachel, placing the child on Rachel's knees. And Rachel said, God hath judged me, and hath heard my voice, and hath given me a son. Therefore called she his name Dan. Dan means judgment. Okay, this is going to be important to remember here after a bit, because when Leah starts bearing children again, she's going to name a daughter Dinah, which is the feminine of this name. Now, Rachel's saying, see, God has judged me. He's heard my affliction. He's judged in favor of me. He's given me a son through my handmaid, calling his name Dan, judgment. All right. Well, later on, Leah's going to say, yeah, but he's given me more. So she calls her name Dinah. In that way, of course, she feels that she can be justified as well. There's a lot of bitter rivalry going on here. And Jacob is kind of a pawn going in between these wives of his. They're jealous of each other. There's a rivalry that's going on, and Jacob's caught in the middle of it. And that should be a good lesson for everybody, men and women. You don't need another spouse. Men, you don't need more than one wife. Ladies, you don't need more than one husband. You've got all you can handle, and that's the way God intended that. One man, one woman makes one flesh. By the way, that's scriptural math. 1 + 1 = 1. All right, in the sense of marriage. 2 become one flesh. All right, not 3 or 4. 2 become one flesh. All right, so now coming down to verse 7, Bilhah, Rachel's maid, conceived again and bare Jacob a second son. Rachel said, with great wrestlings have I wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed. And she called his name Naphtali, or Naphtali, meaning my wrestling, my struggle with my sister. You get the picture here, just briefly, just from what we're reading we can see that there was some intense rivalry that was going on between these two women. All right. The argument back and forth. And we can understand why they would feel this way, but still not a desirable situation, is it? All right. So she has two children by her handmaid, Bilhah. And when Leah saw that she left bearing, she took Zilpah, her maid, and gave her to Jacob to wife. Okay, so the competition's intensifying now. Rachel can't bear children, so she's given her handmaid to Jacob, and she's born children for Jacob. So Leah decides, I'm not bearing children anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and give my handmaid to Jacob as well. So the competition gets interesting again here, doesn't it? Zilpah. Zilpah, she gave Zilpah to Jacob. Zilpah, Leah's maid, bare Jacob a son. Leah said, a troop cometh, and she called his name Gad. Why she calls him a troop, I don't know exactly. It could be that, I've got way more children born for Jacob than Rachel does. All right. It may be that competition. A troop comes. I'm going to bear children this way, and I'm going to have a whole troop compared to what Rachel, my sister, has. Again, terrible jealousy and competition going on between these sisters. That shouldn't be that way, but that's how it turned out. All right. So she calls his name a troop. It also means good fortune. So maybe that's what it was. I have the good fortune of being able to bear these children for Jacob. All right. And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bare Jacob a second son. And Leah said, happy am I, for the daughters will call me blessed. And she called his name Asher, which means blessed or happiness. Okay. That's a little better name, I think, all right, to call him happiness. So instead of referring to her argument with Rachel or the competition between these two women, she seems to be concentrating now that she's happy because she's had these sons. She's born these sons for Jacob, even with her handmaid. So where's the count now? Have you been keeping count? How many sons did Leah have up to this point? The four big ones. The four big ones. Yeah, Reuben and who else? I'm missing one here. I'm trying to get the second one. You got Reuben. You have Judah, of course, is the fourth born. Levi and who's the second one? Somebody? Simeon. There. Why I couldn't think of that. I know it as well as I knew my own name. Sometimes I forget that too. All right, so those four, those are born by Leah. These are the big four. These are the older ones, and they have a lot to do. Levi, of course, becomes especially Levi being the priestly tribe, and Judah especially is going to be the one through whom the Abrahamic promise is going to be called. All right, and now, so we had those four sons, and we have the two handmaids now who have each borne how many sons for Jacob? 2 each. All right, so now we're up to 8 sons. Big family, but we're not done yet. Okay, here's 8 sons that are born. All right, now verse 14 says, and Reuben went in the days of the wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field, and brought them to his mother Leah. And then Rachel said to Leah, give me, I pray thee, of thy sons' mandrakes. Now, this is a little side story that comes in here that might confuse us when we first read over it, until we understand something of the situation. I believe, this is just my opinion, so take it for what it's worth, mandrakes were a little yellow plum-like fruit that grew on an herb of the field. And they were rumored to have aphrodisiac qualities to them, so that if a woman would eat these, she would become more fertile. And so I believe, this is just my take on it, why this would be inserted in here, and you take it again for what it's worth. My opinion, so I've warned you. I believe Rachel has figured out her sister's secret. Now we know. Now we know. Not CoQ10, mandrakes, all right? Your big secret's not vitamin C or vitamin K or whatever it is that we're taking now that's supposed to help us and do all this stuff. It's mandrakes. Mandrakes are what's going to make me fertile. She says, how about you give me some of those? All right, so Leah, maybe she believes this, but I don't believe there's any real truth to it. But she's gonna get a little snippy with her sister here, isn't she? She said unto her, Is it a small matter that thou hast taken my husband? I can imagine why she feels the way she does. All right. She was given to Jacob at first, all right, to be his wife. But after Jacob fulfilled his week, he got Rachel also because he worked for the 7 years for not Leah. He worked those 7 years for Rachel. But he had to work an extra 7 years now so he could have both of them. He didn't want 2 wives, but he wound up with 2 wives, didn't he? He didn't want to have 4 women bearing children for him, but that's how it worked out because they each had a handmaid. So Leah's saying, is it a small matter? You've taken my husband, and now wouldest thou take away my son's mandrakes as well? Why, you just take everything, why don't you? You know, it's my son, Reuben, he found them and brought them to me. Why should I give them to you? So Rachel's going to make a deal. Rachel said, Therefore he shall lie with thee tonight for thy son's mandrakes. I'll purchase the mandrakes from you, and this is the price. So instead of him coming in to me tonight, he's going to sleep with you. Okay, now that sounds crazy to us, but that's the deal. That was the deal that she made with her sister. It makes you shake your head, doesn't it? All right, first of all, I don't believe there was any spiritual power in the mandrakes. It was God who took care of everything. I'm sure of that. It was just mandrakes, and it was a superstition, probably a silly one. But Rachel, I think, has discovered or feels like she's discovered this is Leah's secret. She's had these mandrakes all along. Now, if I'd have had them, I'd have a bunch of kids now too. So she's going to take the mandrakes. She's going to take the mandrakes, and Leah's going to be able to be with Jacob tonight. Now, I get the impression here because remember, Rachel is loved. Leah is hated or loved less, would be more accurate. I believe that probably Jacob was dwelling most of the time with Rachel, that he was with her. And she was the one that he loved from the first. Okay, so I can understand that. But tonight is going to be a little different. Look at verse 16. Jacob came out of the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him and said, Thou must come in unto me. Well, why would I do that? For surely I have hired thee with my son's mandrakes, and he lay with her that night. She was pretty insistent about that. You're mine tonight. You're coming in with me. All right? Because Rachel got the mandrakes, I get Jacob. That was the deal. And God hearkened unto Leah. That kind of puzzles me. I'll have to be honest with you. But the way these sisters are fighting back and forth, God still has a soft spot in his heart for Leah, doesn't he? Because he knows she's not loved in the same way or with the same intensity that Jacob loves Rachel. So he feels sorry for Leah, and she conceives and bears Jacob a 5th son. She'd left off childbearing for a while. She had the 4. Here's number 5 that comes along now, the 5th son. And Leah said, God hath given me my hire, because I have given my maiden to my husband. And she called his name Issachar, which means wages. Wages. This is the cost. I bought my husband with mandrakes, and now I have a 5th son, so that's what she named him, wages. The wages for my 5th son is Issachar. And Leah conceived again, and bare Jacob the 6th son. Leah said, God hath endued me with a good dowry now. Now will my husband dwell with me, because I have borne him 6 sons. And she called his name Zebulun, which means a habitation or a dwelling. Now my husband will live with me instead of with my sister, because I've borne him 6 sons. Beat that, Rachel. Now you still keeping count? How many are we up to? We're up to 10 now, right? Number 2 for each of the handmaids, the 2 handmaids, that's 4. This is the 6th son born to Leah. So 6 plus 4 is 10. We've got 2 more to go. 2 more sons. Well, if you're a believer in Mandrakes, or whatever you want to believe in, we're going to see a big change here that's going to happen. Now, it comes with a bitter pill of sadness as well, as we're going to see. All right? And God, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. Look at verse 21. Afterwards, Leah bare a daughter and called her name Dinah. Now, why stick that in there? Why insert that? Because Dinah is the feminine form, as we've already mentioned, of the name Dan. And remember, Rachel, through her handmaid, names one son Dan because God is judged in my favor. And Dan means judgment, and has given me a son by my handmaid. Now she's going to say, yeah, but God's judged in my favor now because I have 6 sons plus the 2 for my handmaid. I've got 8. I've got you beat. I've got you beat. You only have 2. Again, petty, yes, definitely petty, but that was the situation. I do not, for one moment, envy Jacob in this situation. I hope you don't either. I don't think any of us do. All right, and Jacob remembered Rachel and hearkened to her and opened her womb. I don't believe the Mandrakes did it at all. I believe, just like the verse says, God opened Rachel's womb. Whatever the cause for her not being able to conceive, God has opened it up, and now she's going to conceive as well. And she bears a son and says, God hath taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. There are a couple things in this verse that if you read it over very briefly, you're not going to catch it. First of all, the name Joseph means he adds. All right. So God has added to Rachel another son. She had the 2 by her handmaid, Bilhah, but she now has her own son that she herself bore. So she's up to 3 now, counting the 2 for the handmaid. But did you notice the tense of this verse? The Lord shall add to me another son. That's a prophetic statement. He's added to me already, but she says he's going to add another. He's going to add me another. Is that true? It sure is. Sure is. I'm sure that in some way, just like Rebekah went to the Lord and inquired of the Lord why there was a struggling in her womb, and God told her, I don't know the circumstances, the situation, or how it came about, but God told her 2 nations are in your womb, they're fighting with each other, 2 different peoples, and when they're born, you're going to have 2 sons, and they're going to become 2 different nations that are going to fight with each other too. In some way, God revealed to Rachel she was going to have 1 more son. God shall add to me another son. So not only is Joseph an additional son for Rachel, but God will add her another. It's a prophetic statement as well. And that turns out to be very, very true. And it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph that Jacob said unto Laban, send me away that I may go unto mine own place, into my country. We're going to get away from the childbearing part here just for a little bit, because, again, it's going to come with a note of sadness here with the final son that is born. But Jacob is seeing now, I've got 11 sons, I got a big family, a lot of mouths to feed, and here I am still slaving away for Laban. I need to take what's mine. We need to divide these things up, figure out what's my wages, go my way, get away from Laban, let Laban take care of his things, and I'll take care of mine now. Because kind of like Lot and Abraham, the 2 of them being too great to dwell together, it's time for them to separate apart. Now, Laban's happy to just keep things the way they are because, as we're going to see here, he's being benefited greatly by Jacob's presence. He knows this, which give him some credit here. He's deceitful, he's conniving, but he also is a smart enough man, shrewd enough to know the reason why he's being blessed so much. And we're going to see that here just a little bit. So Jacob says, give me my wives and my children for whom I have served thee, and let me go. For thou knowest my service which I have done thee. There was no argument, was there? No argument. Jacob has served for 14 years and he served well. At the end of this 14 years, because we're going to see exactly this is at the end of the 14 years because of the wages he's going to agree on from this point on. Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry. Stay with me. Stay with me. For I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake. Now there's, again, credit given to Laban for recognizing this and seeing this. Laban has learned by experience that God has blessed him for Jacob's sake. I like Dehoff's comments on this. Experience is a great teacher, isn't it? There's no doubt about that. But if that's the only way you can learn things is by experience, not the best, really. I mean, experience is a good teacher. But I don't need to experience how hot the stove is before I touch it. Okay, someone says, Steve, don't touch that stove, it's hot. Well, let me just see. I mean, some people, that's all they can learn by is experience. Let's not be exactly that way. I mean, experience is good. It's a good teacher. You never forget that stove is hot, will you? All right? You touch it one time, that'll be it. You won't touch it again, will you? Or if you do, you'll be real careful. Somebody tells me a stove is hot, I'm not going to plop my hand down on there and hold it there just to see if it is. All right? So you can learn other ways than experience. Some ways are even smarter if you can learn by observing and watching, or learn by what someone tells you and instructs you. That's even better yet. But experience will do, if nothing else. And Laban had learned by experience that God was blessing him tremendously because he was in close proximity to Jacob. Now, back up a couple of chapters. What did Abimelech say to Abraham? He said something very similar. God's blessing you. We're being blessed because you're here, basically. You're a prince among us. You are a prince of God among us. The Hittites said the same thing, didn't they? You're a prince of God among us. We won't withhold any of our tunes. So these, people began to realize, hey, we're really experiencing a great deal of blessing here lately. Why? Well, what's the common denominator? What's the reason why everything has changed? Why are we being blessed so richly? Abraham's here. Laban learned this too. Why am I being blessed so much? Why is everything going so great? Jacob's here. That's the only thing that's changed. So Laban says, I've learned by experience that I'm being blessed because of you, Jacob. I'm being blessed. Jacob's working hard for Laban. He's an honest worker. Whatever else Jacob might be, maybe he might be deceptive at times. Maybe he's the heel grabber that turns Esau on his head or on his ear, or whatever you want to look at that. But he is also a hard worker too, isn't he? He's a hard worker. And he's learned to work hard and to please whatever his wages are. There's a good lesson for us in that as well. And he said, appoint me thy wages and I will give it. So Laban says, whatever it is, there's no argument there. Whatever your wages are, I'll give you your wages. And he said unto him, thou knowest how I have served thee and how thy cattle was with me and how great these herds have become. That's the implication. For it was little which thou hadst before I came, and it is now increased unto a multitude. The Lord hath blessed thee since my coming. Now when shall I provide for mine own house also? How do we divide these up, in other words? You had little when I came, but now you've got great. And it's all because of me. That's what Jacob is saying. So how do we divide these up? How can we be fair? I need some, you need some. How do we divide them? How can we decide which ones are mine, which ones are yours? And he said, what will I give thee? What shall I give thee? And Jacob said, thou shalt not give me anything if thou wilt not do this thing for me. I will again feed and keep thy flock. Or I'm going to serve you for a while longer here. And we're going to do this. This is how we're going to divide them up. All right, but it's not going to be you deciding or me deciding. Jacob's very wise here. Maybe God has given him this information ahead of time, probably has, but Jacob's being very wise here. If Jacob would say, well, just let's divide him in half. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, let's just, this one for me, one for you, one for me, one for you. They could have done this. What would have happened? Well, you got the best. Even if it was random, Jacob took the best. These are ours. It's still going to happen, by the way, isn't it? The sons of Laban are going to get pretty upset with Jacob, and he's stealing our inheritance. This is ours. This should be ours, and Jacob's taking it. That's not true, but that's what they say. That's what they feel about it. But he's going to make it so this is the way it's going to be. And we're going to see that things are going to change a little bit, too. This agreement's going to change a few times. Jacob says 10 times, you've changed my wages. I'm sure he means, first of all, with Leah and then with Rachel. That's 2 right there. Does he mean a literal 10 times, or is it hyperbolic speech? Is he just exaggerating? You might say, you changed my wages 10 times. Like we might say, if I've told you once, I've told you 100 times. Make your bed, or do the dishes, clean your room. All right? You do that with our kids, don't you? We do that with our kids, I should say. We say, if I've told you once, I've told you 100 times. That might be what Jacob's doing here. Or maybe he changed his wages 10 times too. We don't know for sure. We're not given all the details about it. But he says, here's how we're going to do it. I will pass through all thy flock today, removing from thence all the speckled and spotted cattle, and all the brown cattle among the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and of such shall be my hire. Laban's hearing this, and he's scratching his head and saying, where's the downside to this? I don't know if you have any experience with cattle or with sheep. How many are ring-streaked and speckled, Dave? You know? How many of them come out different than their parents? Kind of rare. Where's the downside, Laban's? They're going to all come out this way. Every once in a while, they're going to throw a calf that's a little odd looking. Every once in a while, but not most of the time. They're going to look like mom and dad. How can I go wrong with this? Right? How can I go wrong with this? The ring-streaked, the spotted, the speckled, and the brown among the sheep. For the most part, the sheep are going to be white. Well, white, really dirty white. Right? That's why I think of a sheep as dirty white. They're not like the walls in here. They're more kind of a dingy gray white. But anyway, that's what Laban has to be thinking about this. He's got some experience in this. He knows how this works. How can this be wrong? How can I go wrong by this? Yeah, sure. Where do I sign? He's ready to go right now with this. And so shall my inheritance answer for me in time to come, when it shall come for my hire before thy face. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and brown among the sheep, that shall be counted stolen with me. So if I take any that's not like this, then that'll be stolen. All right? And the same goes the other way. If you take the ring-streaked, spotted, speckled, and brown sheep, then that's mine. All right? So it's kind of like a brand. If the cattle are this way, if the sheep are this way, they belong to me. All right? Laban said, behold, I would it might be according to thy word. All right? You said it. I'm willing. Let's just do that. And he moved that day the he-goats that were ring-streaked and spotted, all the she-goats, the speckled, the spotted, and every one that had some white in it, and all the brown among the sheep, and gave them into the hands of his sons. And he set 3 days' journey betwixt himself and Jacob. And Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. Now it's going to come down to it that he's going to serve for 6 years. All right, he doesn't really set the time. He's going to dwell with him, but it's going to be 6 years that he's going to serve for these cattle. And later he's going to tell Laban this. That brings the grand total of the years away from Canaan and his father's house are going to be how many years? 20 years. Okay. Remember what Rebekah said to him? I'm going to send you up to Laban's, and you're going to go up there and spend a few days till Esau gets over it and he's not angry anymore. Well, a few days turns into 20 years. That's a pretty big chunk out of a man's life, isn't it? So for 20 years, he's going to be in Padan Aram at his father-in-law Laban's house and working under Laban. Okay? Now, what Jacob does here, again, like the Mandrakes, I don't believe there's any power in this at all. Maybe God told him to do this as a test of faith, and Jacob did it. Whatever the reason was, this is just how it came down. It was God who caused the cattle and the sheep and the goats to throw what they did, to give the offspring the way they did. But this is the means that Jacob used. Again, sounds very superstitious to me, like the Mandrakes. But God will even use situations like this sometimes to bring things about. Notice what he does. Jacob took him rods of green poplar and of hazel and the chestnut tree, and peeled white streaks in them and made the white appear which was in the rods. When you take I don't know, as a kid I used to do this a lot with a pen knife, pocket knife. You take a branch off of a tree and then start skinning it, just for the fun of doing it. And you can make streaks in it, or you can skin all the bark off it. It's real clean and real white looking, right? By comparison to the dingy bark. All right. This is what Jacob did. He took these rods and it says he peeled them, or he peeled the bark off of them. And he set the rods which he had peeled before the flocks in the gutters and the watering troughs when the flocks came to drink, that they should conceive when they came to drink. So he put the rods there, and the thought was that if he does this, this will cause them to conceive. And he would do it in this way. And the flocks conceived before the rods and brought forth cattle, ring-straked, speckled, and spotted. Okay? So this is how Jacob does this. He puts the rods in front of the cattle and the sheep when he wants to. When he doesn't want to, if they look weak or sickly, he doesn't do this. All right? He does this only for the stronger of the cattle. And Jacob did separate, he says, the lambs and set the faces of the flock toward the ringstake, and all the brown of the flock of Laban. So these are the ones that he said that he would take as his hire, and all the brown of the flock of Laban. And he put his own flocks by themselves and put them not unto Laban's cattle. So he's already begun to separate the ring-straked, spotted, speckled, and the brown-colored sheep. All right, he's going to take them out. And it came to pass whenever the stronger cattle did conceive, that Jacob laid the rods before the eyes of the cattle in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. Okay, that's smart. We'll take the stronger of the two. The weaker ones, now he says, when the cattle were feeble, he put them not in, so the feebler were Laban's. These are all going to turn out to be Laban's. They're going to conceive as well, but they're not going to be the stronger of the cattle and the flocks. And the man increased exceedingly, and had much cattle, maidservants, men servants, and camels and asses. Where do you suppose he got the camels from? Just as a side note. Maybe these were Laban's as a gift that might have been brought up by the servant. Remember when he came to get Rebekah? Maybe. We don't know exactly. Camels were kind of an extravagancy. I mean, you could have a pickup truck, you could have a Volkswagen, you could have a Honda or Chevy, whatever. But if you had a camel, you had a Cadillac. All right, that was for the most wealthy alone. Remember, Abraham's servant brought how many? He was looking for Rebekah. 10 camels. Okay, brought 10 camels up, and he gave all these gifts to Rebekah's family's household. All right, so maybe some of those camels were left there as gifts. Maybe they multiplied in this way. We're not told. Or maybe he just decided to get them. If you had these, that was the mark of a very wealthy man. All right, so we're reading something here about Jacob that sounds a lot like Abraham and Isaac, doesn't it? God has blessed them exceedingly, not just normally. God blesses everybody normally, doesn't he? He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good. He sends rain on the just and the unjust. Even a wicked man, if he plants a garden, he's going to get sunshine and rain just like everybody else, isn't he? He's going to be blessed. God blesses everybody in that regard. But Jacob, Isaac, Abraham are blessed exceedingly, much greater. They are favored, not because God's a respecter of persons, but because they serve the one true and living God. And they are the chosen people. God has chosen that through Abraham, because of Abraham and his obedience and his faithfulness to God, in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. And this is how it's going to be brought about. We're going to have descendants. They're going to become a nation. We're going to give them a land. And Christ is going to be born from this nation. All of that gives them all these exceeding blessings. God is showing his favor to them. Ron, you had a comment? Mm-hmm. Right. And how great that is. No matter what happens, we've still got that. And that can't be taken away. I saw a bumper sticker, or maybe it was a sticker in the back of a windshield the other day, or a window of a car. Had the cross and said, "No man can take this from me." And that's a good thought. That Jesus died on the cross for our behalf, and I think that was the message that was intended. Nobody can take that from you. If you become a Christian, you remain faithful to him, that reward is promised and it's sure. Okay? We are tremendously blessed today. And we are today the spiritual Israel, aren't we? We're not the physical, literal Israel, not the literal descendants of Abraham, but are we Abraham's children? We read the book of Hebrews. We're going to be studying that too, aren't we, for next year, right? Reading in the book of Hebrews for the Bible Bowl next year, you're going to find that we are Abraham's seed because we are following after his example. So in a spiritual sense, we're Abraham's children today. Just like in a literal sense, the Israelites were all Abraham's children. In a physical, literal sense, you and I can be children of Abraham, sons of Abraham, because we follow his example of obedient faith. You see, we do that, we are the spiritual Israel, the church. That's God's chosen people today. Okay, chapter 31. We got a little bit of time here. Maybe we get started a little ways into chapter 31. And he, that is Jacob, heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all his glory. He's getting the very best. Now remember, Laban, when he heard this, how can I go wrong with this deal? The ring strake, the speckled, the spotted, and the brown sheep. How can I go wrong with this? Every once in a while they'll throw one like that. But yeah, sure, you can have all them. Well, it turns out that God gives Jacob all the ring straked and speckled, and that's the best and the most. It all goes over to Jacob. So Jacob hears, the rumors come back to him. He hears them saying this. Maybe he hears them eavesdropping, he hears them saying it, or maybe the rumor just gets back to him that Laban's sons are very displeased with how things are going. They see how it's working, because they're working the flocks and the herds of Laban as well, and they're seeing Jacob come and take the very best for himself. But that was the deal. That was the deal. He's not taking any of the white sheep. He's not taking the plain one-colored cow. He's taking only the spotted, the speckled, the ring-straked, and the brown sheep. That's all he's taking. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. So he's not being favored by Laban at all now. He sees Laban looking at him out of the corner of his eye with a scowl. All right, so Laban is he's not as friendly as he was. And the Lord said unto Jacob, return unto the land of thy fathers and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. So if Jacob needed a little more incentive, the Lord gives it to him, doesn't he? If Jacob's thinking, this is enough. I've been serving. I served 7 years for Leah when I thought I was serving for Rachel. Then I had to serve another 7 years for Rachel. And now I've got 11 sons, and I've been increasing the flocks and the herds of Laban, And now that's been going on for 6 more years. So I'm here 20 years. I've done all this, and Laban doesn't even want to look at me. His face is not toward me as it was before. And now God says, all right, Jacob, that's enough. Time to go back home. So get up and get everything together and get back to your kindred. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock. Is that the second or first one? First one? Okay, we got some time there. So he calls his wives to him to discuss the matter, and said unto them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not toward me as before, but the God of my father has been with me. Remember at Bethel? If you'll be with me to take care of my needs, he said, I will serve you, and I'll give you the tenth. I'll give you a tenth of everything that comes to me. It comes back to you. All right? Jacob didn't go back on his word, and God didn't go back on his either. God did blessed him exceedingly, as we've already read. He said, and you know that with all my power I have served your father. You know this. You know this. He's your father, but you've been my wives for the last, 7 years, it'll be 13 years anyway. You've seen how I've served to get all that I've gotten. And for the last 13 years, you've both been my wives. And we've got families and everything now. We've got our sons together, our children, and we got all these flocks and herds just like we agreed upon, but things are not going well. All right. And your father hath deceived me and hath changed my wages 10 times. Now, it kind of makes me think that this is a literal 10 times because Rachel and Leah don't call him on this. All right. Wait a minute. Dad might have changed them a couple times, not 10 times. They don't call him on this. So maybe it is a literal 10 times. Or maybe it's just hyperbole. We don't know for sure. But God suffered him not to hurt me. God didn't allow Laban to hurt me or to take from me. If he said, thus the speckled shall be thy wages, then all the cattle bear speckled. And if he said, thus the ring straked shall be thy hire. It's just perhaps a different pattern, maybe like with stripes. Okay, then all the cattle were ring straked or striped. Thus God hath taken away the cattle of your father and hath given them to me. You see, wasn't the skinned up rods that he used his pocket knife to peel the bark off of. Although that's what he did. It was God who did it. All right, that much he does acknowledge. Whether God told him to do that. Sometimes God gives us a command that might not make a whole lot of sense. But we do that to prove our faith, to prove that we believe in him and that we're willing to do it. And it came to pass at the time the cattle conceived, I lifted up mine eyes, behold, a dream. Behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ring-streaked, speckled, and grizzled. So they were different. They weren't the solid colored cattle of Laban. And the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob, and I said, here am I, like Abraham and Isaac. And he said, lift up now thine eyes, and see all the rams which leap upon the cattle are ring-straked, speckled, and grizzled, for I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. What a lesson for Jacob. I have seen all that Laban's done to you. And this is how it's going to turn out for Laban, because he's been deceptive and he's been wicked, really. Do you suppose Jacob might think, this is kind of a payback for what I did to my brother Esau? Rough. That's quite a revelation to him, I would imagine. All the things that's happening to Laban, because Laban did these things. I did these things to my own brother. So not good at all. Okay, we're out of time. We'll pick up there in our study, Lord willing, on Wednesday evening.